Well, welcome to the Holy Roast podcast here early in our second season. Thanks for joining with us today. We are so excited. We have our new Episcopal leader, Bishop David Graves, who's with us today for an interview. We're so excited. As of September 1st.
That's correct.
Bishop of Kentucky, Central Appalachia, as well as Tennessee, Western Kentucky.
That's correct.
Yes. So thank you, Bishop, so much for being with us today.
Oh, well, it's a privilege. I appreciate the invitation, and it's just great to be able to sit down with both of you. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, we feel like this is just going to be a great opportunity here early in our second season, but in your first month here as our new Episcopal leader, a great way for clergy and leaders to get to know you.
Right.
And so our first question for you this morning is just to say, tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and maybe a little bit of that early call to ministry that you experienced.
Okay. Well, again, thank you all for this invitation and for what you're all doing in ministry to share the gospel through this podcast. You know, I grew up in East Tennessee, Knoxville, Tennessee. That's where I was born. And went to the University of Tennessee. Don't hold that too much against me.
Okay.
Yeah.
One person in our state will appreciate that. Caleb Wheat, I think.
Maybe one.
Yeah.
I've got one of my district superintendents who's trying to help me with Kentucky sports. So he's educating me on that. So we have a good time.
Don't give in. As a Florida Gator and a Duke grad, don't give in to the Kentuckians.
He has some friends,
fight
not
the
me.
good fight.
Right. So you know, I'm a fourth generation United Methodist, Methodist specifically. I was confirmed in the newly formed United Methodist Church in 1970. Wow. And so grew up in the church. I tell people I was going there 9 months before I was ever born because that's just kind of the way it was. Yeah. You know, I would often ask as I got a little older, do we have to go to church today? And my parents would say, no, you get to go to church today, you know. So that was kind of where the upbringing I had with my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, my sister. And that just helped form my faith and form my relationship with Christ. I go back, it was Sunday school teachers, it was coaches, it was teachers I had in school, because it took a village for me to kind of get it. Mm-hmm. And so it was when I was going to college at the University of Tennessee. My goal in life was really, I was in business administration. I either wanted to start my own company or I wanted to have a Fortune 500 company that I was working for because I really wanted to buy the Atlanta Braves. I'm a great baseball fan, and I really wanted to own them. This was in the 70s. There was a guy by the name of Ted Turner that had $10 million. I had $10, and so he wound up buying them. And
really big bidding war over that one.
Close.
It was a bidding war, yes. But it was during that time I was also serving as a part-time custodian in my church. So I would go to school during the morning, early afternoon, and then late afternoon and the early evening I would go and, you know, set up tables and chairs, take down tables and chairs, clean whatever I needed to do, strip and wax floors. I'm so thankful for luxury vinyl tile now that it's kind of moving away from all that. And so it was in August of 1979, and I was going through locking up. It was a Wednesday night. The activities had ended, and so I was locking up, turning off air conditioners and lights, and I was in the sanctuary. That was my last place, and I was getting ready to walk down that center aisle and go home and probably watch a Braves game because it was still in August. But for some reason, I was walking down the aisle, walking toward the back of the door, and something just caused me to turn and look at the chancel area. It was a split chancel with the lectern on one side, the pulpit on the other. And I had gone to the children's messages on those steps. I had sung in the children and youth choir on those steps. But the thought came, I wonder what it feels like to stand in that pulpit. Because I'm an introvert by nature, and I was one of those kids that never asked a question in class because I didn't want to look like I was stupid or dumb. And I had a question, and somebody else would ask that question, and the teacher would go, that's a great question. I'm thinking, I had that question. I had that same question, you know. But I was just so timid, so shy. And so I walked up there, got it, took a couple of steps up into that pulpit, looked over all those empty pews, and I heard this voice that was just crystal clear. This is what I called you to do.
Wow.
Naive me, I kind of looked around about, is there something else I need to do in here around cleaning, straightening, turning off? Then I heard the voice again, this is what I called you to do. And in that moment, it was revealed to me that God was calling me to proclaim the gospel of Christ. So I went to my pastor. We had conversations. I read through that candidacy book, went through the candidacy process, and determined that God was calling me into it was very clear, the ordained ministry of the United Methodist Church. And so that really, and people were really surprised by that because some said, I saw that in you. And the support was great. And so from there, I spent my first 14 years in youth ministry and just really loved that. After 14 years, those lock-ins kind of got to me a little bit. So, but it was like, my 2 children were born. I have 2 children, Casey and Greg.
Okay.
Casey's my daughter, lives in Northeast Tennessee, married to our son-in-law, Brian. They have our 2 grandchildren, Brooks and Lucy. My son-in-law has really corrupted my grandson. He's an Alabama fan.
Oh, no.
My son-in-law has 2 degrees from Alabama, so, it was very hard for us to buy a Crimson Tide jersey for Brooks for Christmas. Yeah, it was tough. So anyway, and it may be a hopeless situation, but our granddaughter Lucy, Brooks is 8, Lucy is 7, and Lucy, she's a big Tennessee fan. She's got the Tennessee cheerleader outfit. So that house is very divided.
I'm sure.
Around sports. They're very united around their faith. And
So let's just throw UK in the mix now. It's going to be great. It's going to be great.
That's right. And so, and my son Greg is, he lives in Chattanooga, and he's in the restaurant business. And we've been very blessed by our children. But it was, during that time that they were getting older, and the Holy Spirit was kind of, I'm leading you to this next step.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful 14 years. I saw hundreds of students come to know the Lord. I officiated in a lot of their weddings and baptisms, and so it was just really neat. And so I just felt God calling me to kind of take that next step. So the senior pastor, I was working in a multi-church staff, and he came to me and said, you wouldn't be interested in being the associate pastor and having the Sunday evening worship service back in the 80s, the late 80s and 90s. Sunday night service was still kind of a thing to do, still is for some. And so I thought about that and decided to do that. That's what I did for 3 years. Got a new senior pastor, and I said, I feel God's calling me to be the pastor of a church now. And I remember him coming down one day and saying, if you'll stay here, we'll get, and I don't think he had any authority to say this. He said, we'll give you a $10,000 raise.
Okay.
And I said, well, I really appreciate that. I said, but it's not about money. It's about what God's calling me to do. And so I was appointed to a small membership church in Kingsport, Tennessee. And we just had a great 4 years there. Just saw the church really grow from averaging 100 and something people to about 300. It was just really neat. We started one of the first contemporary worship services in that region.
Wow.
That was back in the day when that was just starting, and there was a lot of push and pull.
I was going to say, how controversial was that
it was a little
in
bit,
the community?
But the people were very committed because they saw it as part of the mission.
Good.
Yeah.
It wasn't just something we were trying to do, but it was, we raised money to buy equipment and those kind of things, and just saw some wonderful things. Contemporary worship sometimes we think about is just for younger people, but one of the first persons I baptized and had a profession of faith out of that service was someone in their 60s who his wife invited him to come to church, and he just really experienced the Lord there. And so, we can use different things to reach people in different ways. So everything is valuable.
Absolutely.
And so from there, I moved back to the Chattanooga, Tennessee area where I was kind of in a medium-sized congregation in a growing community. We saw that really a lot of church growth there. We went from a couple hundred people on Sunday to over 800 people. And professions, people professing their faith and discipleship are two huge elements for me. And it's still today. Then I became a district superintendent. That's what got me into this bishop thing. My bishop, James Swanson, invited me to come on his cabinet.
Yeah.
And so I was able to use my gifts, and as a district superintendent, people began to notice that. And I was elected a bishop in 2016. But in between that time, I don't want to forget this, between being a DS and being elected bishop for 1 year, I got to go back to Knoxville where I grew up.
Wow.
I got to serve Church Street United Methodist Church, which is right downtown on the river, and sits right on the edge of the University of Tennessee. I could look out my office window and see the Neyland Stadium.
You thought, I've arrived.
I've arrived.
I have arrived. And how tempted were you to turn down that nomination, right? To say, but here
I'm
we
good
are.
here.
Yeah.
It was a challenge because, first of all, I went back to 1979, and I just remember getting out of my car after I'd been there for a few weeks and walking up to the church and just seeing that beautiful facility and thinking to myself, I can't believe I'm the pastor of this church.
Yeah.
A place where we had athletes, educators, the voice of the Vols.
Was he your liturgist? I feel like that would be a fantastic role for that person, right? Can you imagine?
Like the announcer? Is that what you mean? The voice of the
Oh, yeah,
Wow.
the voice of the Vols, yeah. Bob Kessler,
Wow.
yeah. We're still good friends today. And
That's
so,
cool.
and he never missed a Sunday.
Wow.
Regardless of where they played football on Saturday, at 8:30 he was sitting there.
Wow.
On the third row.
Good for him.
Just a great guy. But you also had blue-collar people to the homeless, because there was a homeless ministry there. It was the most unique setting on a Sunday to be with people of all socioeconomic walks of life, color, and theological differences. I mean, but we could have all those discussions and still love one another and be good.
Yeah.
And worship together.
Amen.
Yeah, for such is the kingdom of God.
That is.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of being United Methodist, I believe, because we can come with our differences and we can be together. We may not always agree with one another. At times we may frustrate one another.
Yeah.
But when we focus on the mission of what it is to share Christ, disciple our own lives, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
And so it was hard. I remember there was a woman who was very upset that I was coming to be the pastor there. She even told the bishop she was upset about it.
Wow.
She said, he's into contemporary worship and he's into this. He's not going to fit here. So the Sunday we got ready to go to jurisdictional conference, she comes up to me and grabs me by the stole.
It's a power move right there.
And says to me, please don't leave us.
Wow.
And it just, I remember that to this day. I mean, and when you just try to love people and build relationships with people, it's amazing where we can come to, right?
Right.
And so that made it hard. In fact, 2 other people wanted to lock me in a closet and not let me go.
No, don't go.
But,
what a beautiful... I wonder if that's a great rhythm of sorts. Before you become a bishop, you should go back to local church for a year, and remind yourself of your first love.
Yes.
I mean, that is such a beautiful story of becoming, not to superintendent, that's an important calling as well, right? But going back to that pulpit, loving on those people, and then becoming a bishop. I mean, gosh, that's
meeting them where they
we need
are.
to build that rhythm into
exactly,
this
because we were also on television. And so, but it was recorded on we recorded it on Thursday in the TV studio. That's how we did it back in 2015.
Right. Before we all became televangelists.
Yes, before we all.
Before we're all streaming.
Now they just do it on Thursday in the sanctuary.
There you go.
Sure.
Yeah, they have
with
all
their
the
own equipment,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I could talk a lot about that too. But I just remember the very first time I went down to record in a TV studio, I was as nervous as I could be.
Oh, I'm sure.
But just had a great experience because we did it between the woman who was doing the weather and then the sports director was on my other side.
Yeah.
I was on the green screen, of course. And every once in a while, they would say, that was a good sermon today.
On Thursday afternoon.
On Thursday afternoon.
Yeah.
And one of the big laughs I got was I was greeting people at 11 o'clock. It came on at 8:30. And some people, you thought it was in real time. Mm-hmm. On Thursday, we did it in real time. There was one lady that said, David, you sure looked awful tired this morning on television. I go, well, that was Thursday morning. I go, wow, I need to kind of rest up a little bit. Yeah. But that whole experience just was so enriching. And I just thought how God used that 1 year to really help me in this role. But there's many days where I just long to kind of go back there because the local church is why we exist. It's where ministry takes place. And you'll hear me say this many times when you're around me. The annual conference of Kentucky exists for the local church. And that's the direction you're going to see me talk about for my 4 years with you. But yeah, you're right. It's about the local church. And so 2016 elected a bishop, served in Alabama, West Florida for 6 years. Bishops were retiring, and they needed some of us to take 2 annual conferences, and being from the state of Tennessee, I volunteered to do that.
He is a volunteer.
to do that. And so got to do that for 3 years. And my heart goes out to what's the hurricane that's on the track on this day. So they're my thoughts and prayers. But both of those experiences now have helped me be prepared to lead 3 annual conferences in this perspective.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I love hearing about folks called to ministry and how they've seen God at work. I was in youth ministry too. I only lasted 4 years, not 14, because I remember that first lock-in when I had a baby at home, and I thought, nope, I don't know about this anymore.
Right.
So you lasted a few more years, but I just, it sounds like you've had experience doing almost every area of ministry in the local church, from the custodian to the senior pastor to DS. And I'm just wondering, you've shared a bit about, some of those formative experiences and being passionate about the local church and the community that happens there. But would you say that there's something sort of the most formative that you've, or to add to what you've already shared, that you've carried with you, kind of as your perspective, as a bishop now, as an Episcopal leader, maybe that helps keep you grounded in that way?
Right. I think when you lead, and leading in these days are probably some of the hardest days that all of us are having to lead in. Even if you're managing a restaurant, it's difficult because you've got people. And we live in such a polarized culture right now. But I think for me, just always remembering the power of the Holy Spirit and how I've just seen what I thought was unimaginable. I've seen people healed at the altar from their demons they were carrying inside of them. I've just seen very difficult people come to know Christ, and they're still a little bit difficult, but see their transformation in their life. To see people called into ministry, to see people walk through difficult times together. The fruits of the Spirit, Galatians chapter 5, are really, you'll hear me talk about that a lot. I wear it on a band. I've got it on my wrist today. And I read it. I try to read that every morning. And, there's the fruits of the non-spirit that's listed below that. And then when you get down into verse 20, it talks about the fruits of the Spirit and, love and joy and peace. But what two words that really is patience, and how we be patient with people, and how we be kind. Because people are not patient today. People are not kind to one another. And so those, when we were going through COVID, I went back and just read all through the Old Testament, the prophets, to the Gospels, and read about the difficult journeys they had. Sometimes we kind of step back and say, poor, pitiful us. But there's been journeys all through history. And it's the faithfulness and the witness that you give in the moment that is transformational.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we're not going to see the other side of, but we're called to be faithful in this moment. So it's staying grounded. I've really worked hard on how to deal with conflict. I don't like to create conflict, but I don't mind dealing with conflict, because unresolved conflict is so destructive. How you deal with difficult people, and then how you keep people focused on the main thing. And that's what that's what I've been saying since I got here, is what you're going to hear me say, is that we've got all these things that we can disagree with, but we've got to focus on, it's winning people to Jesus. And that is done in many, many ways. It's discipleship. It's being a voice for the voiceless. And we're called to change our corner of the world. And we can't control what everybody else is doing, but we really can't control much. But we can be faithful to the max right where we are. And so I'm kind of, I'm worn out with talking about the denomination. If you look at any denomination, there's issues in every one of them. Non-denoms, there's issues because there's people.
People, yeah.
And I just believe the United Methodist Church has the great opportunity, and I see it, is our connection is so strong and getting stronger because we know we need each other. We're not, we're not as big as we used to be, and we need to be a difference, in this polarized culture of what it means to be able to sit down and have conversations in the midst of our differences.
Yeah.
And we may not ever agree on certain topics, but we agree on one thing: we both love Jesus. We want to share that love with the world.
Amen. Yeah. We may not agree on everything, but we can still break bread together and worship together and point people to Jesus.
That's right.
And I think in that way, it's in church. I serve a very purple church, and I've said this to them before. And I say, we are doing a holy and a hard thing,
That's right.
trying to keep this family together, because it's good for us to not all think alike, to not all look alike, to not all vote alike. That we are edified, the edification of believers, right? We are edified by one another, by our ability to come together, humble ourselves, listen to one another, fulfill this mission together. That's just my little pocket, right?
Right, that's right.
But to recognize we're a part of this connection. Where I've heard you say we're making space for all people, and that's a beautiful work. It's also a very difficult work.
It is.
It's a messy work,
but it's because it's people. It's because it's we all are a little quirky in our own ways.
Right.
But to call people back to that love of Christ and yes, the fruits of the Spirit, because that's what makes it all possible. That's the only way we can experience kind of transformation, right? You might have already answered this a little bit, but in your 8 years now as bishop and starting in this first month here, what's something that you just really love? I know it's a really hard job, and you've led through very difficult, traumatic times, divisive times, but is there something that you just really enjoy about being a bishop?
It's the people, and it's knowing, people say, well, you've got 3 annual conferences. But I've got more people praying for me today than I ever have in my life. And I feel that power of prayer. And so it's just, and I don't mind showing up and trying to help with issues or problems. And we've all got some. We're all going to have to make some decisions around some things. But it's the people. It's being with people. And here in Kentucky and Central Appalachian Missionary Conference, It's just being with people, and they've all got questions and they've all got concerns, but it's just listening and trying to inspire and give a vision that is not focused on the issues, but focused on what God is calling us to do in these moments.
Yeah.
And it is messy, it is hard, but when you look at the life of Jesus, that's really where he was, right in the middle of all of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And what troubles my heart about things right now is that people kind of want to silo themselves with people just like themselves, think like themselves. And sometimes we need to be with people that do that. You know, we need some respite, but that's not where we're called to live. And that's the challenge for many people. But that's where I kind of love to dive into and to be. You know, the state of Kentucky is a beautiful state, with its geography and all it's doing, and but it's being with people like yourself. I wouldn't have had that opportunity if I wasn't a bishop in the United Methodist Church. And so when I retire, I will have served 5 annual conferences in 5 states.
Wow.
And I never thought I would ever hardly leave East Tennessee.
Yeah, but here you are.
That's right.
Yeah, and we're so grateful for that. Yeah, thank you.
And just beautiful congregations. I mean, you know, that just are just doing great things. And so I just applaud what is happening in this annual conference.
Yeah. Well, I'm from Kentucky. I'm born and raised here in Louisville, so I have just a ton of things that I love about this state. But I'm pretty sure that he already shared that he's from Florida. So I think there's a reason why you wanted to ask Bishop our next question about what he loves about this.
Yeah, I wonder what
state, because he's still learning all of our ways.
That's right. There's a lot to learn.
There's a lot.
I married a Kentucky girl, and so we met at Duke Divinity School there in North Carolina, served in Florida for a few years, and made our way up to Kentucky because I heard all Kentucky girls want to return home.
This is true.
And
Absolutely.
And I just kind of obeyed and went along with it, and I'm grateful for it. So I've come to learn this beautiful state and their people and the culture, and so you haven't been here that long, but I wonder what's some of your favorite parts about Kentucky so far.
Well, when you think about Eastern Kentucky, it's very much like East Tennessee in a lot of ways, especially the district where I served as a district superintendent. And I was right up there on the line of that corner of Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky.
Sure. So,
you know, Appalachia, I know well, so it feels a lot like being home. And then, you know, you all have kind of 3 distinct areas as well. You kind of have East, you have Central, and you have West. Yeah. Tennessee's a lot like that. Well, they are. I mean, you know, it's East, Middle, and West. And I'm going to get to explore the Central and West part of Tennessee that I've not really explored in my other annual conference. But, you know, seeing a lot of the geography just reminds me of when I grew up, you know, and yesterday I was at the state capitol in an event, and just that is a beautiful place. And so it's the beauty, it's the history, and I just really like, you know, what leadership in this state's trying to do to bring people together. And so I think that could be an example to the rest of the nation in a lot of ways. So, but in it, you know, it's always the local church, you know, that's where you just see that's what gives you joy and hope. And, you know, I've been able to be in a local church somewhere almost every Sunday. And that's just what brings me back to my roots.
Yeah.
So and just to have the privilege to meet new people and be a part of trying to lead and help people move forward, that's just kind of what I love. That's what God called me to do in this journey. So I get to do what I want to do. I mean, my dad asked me last year, why don't you retire? You know, he really wants me to retire so I can move back and maybe help him more often, you know, because he's 94 and has a lot of health problems. Sure. But I said, what would I do? Because God hasn't released me. I mean, God really spoke to me specifically. I didn't bring you to this point for you to step aside before it's time for you to step aside.
Yeah.
So, and my 26 days here have just proved this is where God wants me to be.
Yeah.
So thank you all for welcoming Nancy and I. We have felt so welcomed, and I think that just speaks volumes to who you all are.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Amen to that.
I felt that same kind of welcome when I came up to Kentucky. Just the
It's good
folks
people.
kind of gather
It's
you
good
in and take care of you, call you, and it's not like that everywhere.
No, not at all.
And so it is kind of that. I love your kind of notation of it feels like coming home again, right? And my prayer for you is that it continues to be that way,
Amen.
right? And
Thank
you continue to feel that nourishment and that welcome and gathering of coming back to family, right? And
thank you.
We'll both be in prayer for you about that. We're in a season, and I want to be careful about the words we use, right?
It's football season.
That's right. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, and the Florida Gators are not doing well. If you're wondering, head coaching position may be open for me, but I don't know. We'll see. But we're in a season for clergy, and this past episode we got to interview the Reverend Laura Hamrick from the Duke Clergy Health Initiative and talk about stressors and burnout and all the data that's coming out about where we've been specifically in the last 5 years and how we are called to take care of ourselves going forward. And so, and I know that's one of your big initiatives and priorities for us as an annual conference to have that clergy health. So I wonder if you can share some of your thoughts and feelings on that, and then what you do to take care of your soul during this time, because it can't be easy. Being reminded of home is very good and beautiful, but we're in a state here, a season.
We are.
And so I wonder if you can help us reflect on that.
Yeah. The last 5 years, there's been layers of trauma.
Yeah.
That COVID is kind of in the rearview mirror in a lot of ways, although we deal with it, but not like we had to deal with it in the past. And then, it's General Conference being postponed, and then a new denomination starting, and then we finally have General Conference, and certain things passed there that people didn't like, felt like it went against their theological belief. One of the things I keep hearing is that General Conference changed our doctrine, and they didn't change our doctrine at all, and they didn't change any of our articles of faith. It was all around social principle, and we've had differing views around social principles ever since we've been talking about social principles in the Methodist Church. Yeah. We're going to have those again, and but when we put everything into social principles, we're always going to be distracted. And that for me is I just can't be distracted by that anymore. And there's space for everyone. General Conference gave specific space for traditional views or more progressive views. Gave local churches more autonomy than they ever have before. I've even heard people complain, well, we have to make a decision now. I don't, we what do we want?
You get to make a decision now, right?
You get to make a decision. That's correct. And so, and I know there's just a lot of anxiety around that. And, now there are folks that are traditionalists feel like I don't have a place. And that hurts my heart because there's a place for everyone. And when we come together at the table and we stay at the table, that's where the richness of life happens. Yeah. When we walk away from the table, that's where division sets in and really divisiveness that really hurts. And so, for me, I've had many layers of trauma. Working through the COVID situation was difficult. And everybody, when you met with people, you had to be up. You had to be, because clergy needed to hear inspiration and not, and they didn't need to hear, I know it's hard, but, or if I ever have to hear again, God called you for such a time as this. I mean, I've heard that over and over and over. God called you to be a bishop for such a time as this. I think God called me to be a bishop, and we're living in times. I mean, that's just the way it is. And so, taking care of yourself is a spiritual discipline. And at some point, in 2000, I want to go back and talk about a story. It's not today, but in 2001, I was in a very dark place myself, and thought about many things. One was just getting out of ministry. And I really just about lost everything there. And my bishop really helped me walk through that. And what I keep telling myself, I don't want other clergy, or really anybody, to walk through what I walk through. So whatever I can do, Lord, to be of help in that. We've got to take our time off. And people talk about how I'm going to use my time, and I tell them it's going to be very strategic.
Yeah.
And what I learned in my last assignment, I had to put more margin in my schedule because the responsibilities, the territory I have could consume every moment. And so you've got to be strategic for that. I encourage every pastor, every person in the church, that you need to take 2 consecutive weeks off sometime during the year, because what I've seen in the past is we preach on Sunday, we jump in the car, we'd go somewhere, and we back on Saturday so we could preach again. That doesn't help anybody.
Not time off there.
That's not a break.
Yeah, it's not
You're
a break.
still writing that sermon coming up. Yeah.
And then I think we really need to go back to the quadrennial look at taking some renewal leave, some extended time. The first time I took 12 weeks off in my local church, and this is when I was going through a difficult time, people were just some people just, well, I don't get that off, or why, are we going to pay him still? Yeah, well, gosh, that doesn't seem fair. I mean, all that.
Yeah.
And so then after the 3 years after that, when I said, I want to take another one off, it was like, notice, yeah, of course. However, we got to be ready, because when he comes back, we're going to be moving and doing some new things.
Moving and shaking.
Yeah.
But the greater lesson I learned from that, and if you don't hear anything else I say today, the lesson I learned from that is there were other people just like me, men and women, both, in work settings that were going through the same thing I was going through. It's all right to get counseling and professional help for yourself.
Yeah.
In fact, I think everybody needs to have a counselor, a psychotherapist, a mentor, and sometimes you need a lawyer. But but you need to have that help. Yeah. You need to be in a small group with perhaps other clergy and laity. That just really, my small groups, that was huge for me. As I was in a small group of men, Nancy and I were in a small group of couples together, and we even had 2 or 3 single people in there, and it was just it was enriching to have and being committed to that, because that helps keeps you centered, focused. And you need to have a group of people that are going to help you keep focused on the mission.
Yeah.
That care more about the mission than you do. But you need a group of folks that are going to care more about you than the mission. And so just surrounding yourself. And then the beauty of that is that you're also setting the example for other people.
Yeah.
So I had people just, they changed their lifestyle because they saw me change my lifestyle. It's a witness. And if we don't model that, clergy, and I was there, I mean, we feel like if we're going to help the situation, a lot of times we got to work harder. We got to work harder. And we really felt that the last 4 or 5 years, because so much stuff has happened. So we got to work harder. We got to work harder. And in some instances we do. But then, we just get ourselves in a bad place. And so, so I just want to encourage clergy, and this has been one of my priorities. It's going to be one of my priorities while I'm here as the bishop in the Kentucky Annual Conference. And I've heard that from multiple people. It's just not mine. I mean, people are asking that it be. And so house staff parish committees and leadership work with one another to really give the time off, and then how we model that. Because if we don't model it, nobody else is.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
What I love, thank you so much for sharing that, because what I love is I hear sort of this humility throughout of we got to stay grounded and remember we're human and we have limits
Right.
And we got to take care of ourselves and surround ourselves with people that care about us as people, as humans, as mothers and fathers and spouses.
Exactly.
Right. Because we've been entrusted with a lot of other responsibilities as well. And so I'm so grateful for, we're not called to save them. There's already someone who did that.
That's right. That's exactly right.
We're called to point them to that person, that God, that Savior. And so I think that's so desperately, I think, what our culture even needs is people that will model it well.
Yes.
Because in our grind, go, kind of fast-paced society, people are burning out everywhere in all sort of the helping professions. And what a grace that we can offer people in other industries as well.
Because when you do that, and those lives are transformed around that, then that ripple effects out to employees. In fact, I got to do to speak to a medical group of doctors, surgeons, and we spent a day and a half. They asked me to spend a day and a half just talking about what we just talked about right here.
Yeah.
And that was because the director of all that group had been had appreciated the witness that she experienced in church, and so it just keeps rippling out there.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
And our culture just needs that so much. And then if you're in a bad place, don't mind, ask for help.
That's right.
Yeah.
Ask for help.
Yeah.
And if you ask for help, a lot of times we thought we ask for help, well, it's a sign of weakness.
We get penalized. Yeah.
That we're going to get penalized.
Red flags.
It's a sign of strength. And because I always tell people, when you're walking through a difficult time, and then you get to the other side of it, this is what God does. God puts somebody else that's walking through what you just walked through, and you get that chance to repeat that back.
And isn't there redemption in that?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
That's right.
Yeah. That's
So
beautiful.
here, pastors, right, we have somebody who's giving you permission right now.
That's right.
Think about it, pray about it, talk with your partner about it, encourage conversations around SPRC. If you need somebody else to do that encouragement through SPRC, let us know. We'll connect you with somebody, right?
Contact your DS.
Yeah, they got you. They got your back. Because I think that's part of it is sometimes I feel like we're waiting for permission to do that when here it is, right? And
Exactly.
first, you didn't need it. It's in the book of discipline, right?
Right,
But we can be so cautious about it because the judgment, the stress over even just engaging in that conversation. But we'll be coming up on another episode of this season of Holy Roast, talking with somebody who helps pastors engage in renewal leave, and then talking and reflecting with one of our pastors who just took renewal leave.
Great.
And so I'm so excited to dive in with them because I think this will be a perfect handoff to say, here's what it looks like, and then here's why it matters so much at a personal level for another pastor in our Kentucky Annual Conference that can reflect upon it, because it's just so crucial and needed. Yes. And I always hear, well, now's not the right time, right? I hear that excuse from pastors all the time, and I've given the same one, right?
It's hard to imagine. How could I be away for 12 weeks? What's going to happen? It's a church will still be there.
That's right.
You know? And so to hear from people who have done it and can tell us about it, it would be helpful for me to imagine it,
yes.
to see it. Yeah.
Yes. So what's your hope for the United Methodist Church at this point? What are your hopes and dreams, what's giving you hope right now?
Yeah, I think one of the hopeful signs in the midst of all of what's happening, because I know there are still people in the Kentucky Annual Conference and other annual conferences that are very upset what happened at General Conference and want to leave, and that breaks my heart, because we're called, we need to be the witness of how we can come together in the midst of this. And General Conference gave space. It's not like we're mandating, they mandated you must be this way or that way. They gave you space. And that's a little bit different than what we've done in the past. And so there's a place for everyone. And people need to really hear that. People that have traditional views, because I have traditional views on things. There's some other things that I am very passionate around, when I see injustice and abuse, racism. I don't want to give the traditional answers, which is basically we don't say anything.
Yeah.
And so there's space for that. There's space around human sexuality and marriage. I mean, people need to read how the new language is going to read, because the language around marriage between a man and a woman is stronger than it ever has been. It talks about faithful. And that's putting some additional wording to it, right? Now, I know it's two persons. I know that. And you can agree or disagree with that. But it also gives you an opportunity, and local churches, to make those decisions. What happens is that when we have to talk about those, it can become divisive in local churches because you have people that have just different viewpoints. And here again, if we get so caught up in that, it's going to be so distracting. And we need to focus on what brings us together and what unites us. And that is Christ, and following what the Holy Spirit is leading us to do. Let the Holy Spirit, let God be the judge of people. That's been freeing for me. That's been healing for me. I don't have to judge them. I mean, I may have opinions, but I'm not going to be their judge. And I can move on.
That's liberating. It's not our job.
It's not our job. And so the connection, I just feel like there's more conversations across theological differences, but across annual conferences, because we're all in the same boat. There's no large annual conference anymore. We're all about the same size. We've all got the same struggles. We all have the same needs. And I just see the sharing of resources and conversation, which I just think we've been missing for a long time.
Yeah.
I see churches that they've lost people, but there seems to be a sense. I mean, I heard a pastor say the other day that I'm in a church now where people are nice. Mm-hmm. They're nice. I mean, shouldn't we be nice? That's part of our Christian witness, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll all have our moments, but that says volumes, you know. And what's so hurtful, I know I'm digressing a little bit, but what's kind of hurtful is for Christians to degrade other Christians.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just not... I had a pastor tell me once, you may be as right, and they may be as wrong, but you still got to be a Christian.
Yeah.
And that makes all the difference, right?
Yeah.
But just to degrade people and to put down people, first of all, that's not our work as Christians. But secondly, why would you want to do that? I know you may have strong feelings, you may disagree, but anyway, I kind of digress a little bit. But this is what kind of gives me hope. And I know it's still going to be hard, it's still going to be messy, but that's where I'm hopeful, because I want us to get in the messiness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to hear me say this. I've been saying it ever since I got here. You're going to hear me say it. You know, this is messy stuff. I want to ask you to get in the messiness. And the one who modeled that was Jesus. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All through the Gospels, Jesus modeled that. And Jesus also modeled taking time off.
That's right.
You know, he did. I mean, Jesus was the greatest leader of all time. And so we're called...
And he took naps.
Yeah. I mean...
Go on a boat ride.
Yeah. I mean, we're called to follow Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And in order... You know, a lot of people want to throw scriptures at people. But if people don't know Jesus, that's not going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. It's when people now have a relationship with Christ, then the scriptures can be unfolded. Mm-hmm. And let the Holy Spirit work with that. And then so that's just kind of what, and then the other hopeful part of it is the next 3 generations. You know, I'm a baby boomer. I'm nearing the end of my working career. And I've really had to wrestle with this over the last several years. You know, let's just take the topic of racism. You know, when something happens, like happened in Louisville a few years ago, we all kind of make statements, we all kind of get into it, and then we get pushed back. Mm-hmm. And then it gets hard. And what do? We stop.
Yeah.
We stop talking about it. And what I've also learned is let's have conversations with people that really want to have conversations with people around racism in particular, rather than trying to push everything on everybody. I think that's more healthy. And so, you know, kind of dealing with those things in that way, I think are helpful. But you're going to hear me talk about time and time again. It's messy work. I want to invite you into the messiness. I don't really want to spend time talking about how you stay or leave the United Methodist Church. I don't really want to talk about, I have to time, I want to talk about those things that are going to make a difference right now in people's lives. Younger generations, they may have traditional viewpoints on parts of theology, but they want to be a part of a church that includes everyone. And over 50% of people are unchurched anyway. The fields are ripe for harvest, but we've got to get in there with people. We've got to love them. We've got to build relationships with them. And some of them may never come to our church, but it's however we share Jesus with them.
Yeah.
And so that's what gives, I just sense there's a real passion for that. Yeah. So that's where I really want to lean into, because I want this church to be strong for my grandchildren and their children as we move forward. And
I always worry. I have a 3-year-old son named Coop, and he's an all boy 3-year-old right now.
I got you.
He's just a wild man. He's down the hall right now in the preschool at Watkins here, and he's great. I love him. But I always worry now, since becoming a parent, what kind of church am I handing over, and what kind of witness am I providing? And the church speak around a PK is important to me. My wife is also a pastor in a different denomination, so he's around church all the time. And I just keep praying that we'll continue to be healing communities for him and for our community, and want him to take on the example of something I want to give over that I'm proud of, right?
That's right.
We're on mission. We're serving. We're loving. Where that table becomes larger and larger, and we may not all agree, but none of my family agrees on everything.
Yeah, that's right.
And so what does it mean to eat and to feast together and to flourish together? And that's, become more of a priority since becoming a dad, that I can give that to Cooper. So I thank you for that hopes and those dreams, because they're yearning for it, whether he's 3 or 15 or whatever. What kind of faithful witness can we provide now?
Well, and I think our young people also too, especially teenagers and young adults, they see the global issues that they've inherited or that we've inherited that are going on in the world. And I think there's a yearning that people want to be a part of a community that's actually going to make a difference in their community.
Do good.
Right?
Yeah.
If it's older generations, like my kids are 4th generation United Methodist as well, have great grandparents who are still active and participating in their churches. And it's like, and not to say that their churches were like this, but there might have been an era in which it felt like, well, this is just what we do. This is sort of our country club of people that we identify with, and we go on Sunday and that's it.
That's right.
But people our age and younger, they don't have time for that, right? If they're going to be a part of something, if they're going to give of themselves and their energy and their money and their time, they want it to be seen and making an impact that we are who we say we are. And we're living on mission in that way.
That's right.
And so I think that gives me hope too for the future of like that. They see through it. They see through some of that fog, and even though it may not be as many as we once had, the ones that we do have are passionate. And I think will lead us to that.
Yeah, how is our local church changing our community, transforming our community as a healing presence of God's love? I'm interested in that.
Yeah,
that's right.
Would your community notice if your church closed its doors?
That's right. Yeah,
I hope so.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Because when we appoint pastors to a local church, we're appointing them to the community.
Absolutely.
And I talked to a lot of seminary students over the last several years. A lot of times it's by Zoom because a lot of seminary education is online. And then some in-person visits. And you ask them, are you ready to come back to the annual conference and serve in the local church? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, Bishop, right now I think I'm going to go get another degree. Or I'm going to go over and work for this private sector or public sector in social justice. Or I'm going to go into counseling. And I'll ask the question, well, what about the local church? And they'll say, I just don't want to be a part of that fussing. And these are gifted people, called, and I'm thinking, and this is where our whole society, younger society, is looking at us. And I get asked questions about the split all the time, and they've just seen the ugliness of that. We have to do better than that. That's not the apostolic church of Jesus Christ,
Right.
and that's what we're called to be.
Yeah, we've spent so much time dealing with that. Like you said, the distraction that we haven't been able to do the things that we love doing, that we actually feel called to do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Bishop, thank you so much for being with us today. It's been such a rich conversation. I've really appreciated this opportunity to hear from you and your kind of hopes and visions for us here in Kentucky. Here in Holy Roast, we have this fun practice where we end each episode with our own roast of the guest.
Oh, good.
It's a kind thing. Remember, we are Christian. We're going to be
We're
nice.
going to live by the fruits of the Spirit here, right?
We're going to try our best. And this one is joy and fun for sure. But we just have about 5 questions here for you that we call our Holy Roasts. You answer them sort of rapid fire. First thing that pops to your mind, kind of, one phrase or one sentence. But what are you reading right now?
The Other Side of Church.
Okay.
And it's really been a great read about folks that are not in church and what they're thinking, because I really want to know that.
Yeah.
So I'm reading the other Side of Church, and so that's kind of what I'm reading now. Also, I'm reading another book called Unashamed Hospitality. It's a secular book, but it was written for a restaurant, but it just talked about the wonderful things that this particular restaurant did for hospitality for people. And it really was ministry.
Wow.
Yeah.
They went far and beyond what they were called to do.
Was it Chick-fil-A?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's the one we think of.
Yeah, it's a restaurant in New York.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And it kind of begins with the story of a waiter waiting on somebody. They passed them, and they waited on them that had been in the restaurant many times, and just struck up a conversation and put his hand on the table, and they were just conversing before he went to his table, and the manager came over and said, "Did you know you touched the table?" And he said, "Well, I guess I did." And he says, "Well, you don't touch the table." And he asked, "Well, what's the reason for not touching the table?" He said, "Because that's the way we've always done it."
Oh, gosh. That'll preach.
Is that church or a restaurant?
This is So those are 2 things, because I'm really trying to get a perspective on how other people are thinking, especially younger generations, and how the in this particular unashamed hospitality, just how corporate people are thinking too.
Yeah.
And then, one of my favorite books that I just gave a copy of this to the cabinet of both Central Appalachian Missionary Conference and Kentucky. It's called The Red Sea Rules. And it's just a book about Exodus chapter 14. And often it's a real great read. And sometimes we're in a place where we're in our Red Sea, we're in our cul-de-sac. And it's just a great read. It's not a process, but it's and I read that book about once a year and I've done that for the last almost 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Because it just speaks volumes. So those are kind of 3, things that are on my reading list right now.
Yeah, I'll have to check a few of those out. Well, I know we're kind of heading into the fall season, but just kind of get to know you question, what is your favorite thing to do in the summer, maybe for fun in the summer?
In the summer for fun, take renewal time.
Oh, there you go.
I really do. I try to take 3 weeks after my annual conferences and just do fun things. Because when you take renewal leave as a bishop, you take yourself out.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so somebody else covers with you. And if you try to come back in, you get in trouble.
Good.
So when you go on renewal leave. So what I try to do for fun, and that allows Nancy and I to really do fun things with our family. So renewal leave, if I had to just sum it up.
There it is.
Does that
There
include
it
a
is,
Braves
3
game,
weeks.
I guess?
Oh, of course.
What's your favorite city in the U.S. other than one you currently live in? You live in a few, but favorite city in the U.S.?
Favorite city in the U.S., outside of kind of the norm, that's a little bit of a hard one. Favorite city. Well, let me just kind of pick one. Because, we own a home in the Chattanooga area, so that's always kind of because we can go back there and nobody knows we're there, and so it's kind of nice. Yeah. It's our retreat center. One of the places I like to go to St. Simon's Island, Georgia. Yeah. Got great restaurants, slow pace. So that'd be kind of one of. I never have lived in St. Simon's. Probably won't live in St. Simon's, but St. Simon's, I guess.
Yeah, you've got some Wesleyan heritage there. Yeah. That's good. Okay, and then last one, you're called up to bat. What's your walk-up song? You play for the Atlanta Braves. What's your walk-up song?
My walk-up song, gosh. Well, my grandson is playing. This is digressing. He's playing travels ball right now on the weekends, and his walk-up song is "Sweet Home Alabama." Oh. Might be a little bit. Probably a good. My walk-up song would probably be a little tagline of Rocky Top.
Okay.
Of course it would be.
A little tag of Rocky Top.
That we will receive that in Christian love.
Fruits of the Spirit.
Fruits of the Spirit. Yes.
There you go. Thank you.
I love that you love that. Well, Bishop, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been wonderful.
Well, thank you all for doing this and this ministry that you're doing. Thank you all.
Yeah, it's a joy. Yeah, and if you haven't caught one of our regional meetings with our new Episcopal leader, I'm sure by the time this comes out, you'll still have a few to come and gather and hear from our new bishop. So thanks for tuning in today.